Well, hello, Fearless Schools podcast audience. Welcome to part one of a special three-part edition of the Fearless Schools podcast, where we uncover what's behind and beyond the cover of a sensational new publication from your pals at Creative Leadership Solutions. That's right, we're going to be chatting with the authors of a great three-part book from CLS, hence the three-part podcast. Get it? And that book is called Fearless Instruction. Today, we're going to learn about the book's inspiration and some of its information, so then we can check it out with an even more appreciative and informed lens. And gosh, we're so glad that you're here with us to do that vital work. So let's get into it, shall we? I'm Dr. Drew Tomlin, your humble host, and I'm joined as always by Dr. Ann McCarty, Director of Professional Learning for CLS. And of course, as mentioned, our wonderful authors are with us. Authors, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll get right into the questions.
Hi Drew, I'm glad to be here. I am Dr. Melissa Stefanski. I am an associate with Creative Leadership Solutions. I'm so pumped about this book, Fearless Instruction. I am an educator for over 30 years and love coaching and helping schools be the best they can for the students and staff within their walls.
Awesome, and glad to hear that you are pumped. So are we.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Michelle Cleveland. I am a CLS associate, and I also am working in San Bernardino City Unified as a Director of Accountability and Educational Technology. I am super excited about this book. I think it's going to be an amazing resource for our educators and leaders out there, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about it.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Dr. Cleveland.
And last but not least, I'm Tony Flock, a partner with Creative Leadership Solutions. I've had the privilege to observe and coach more than 20,000 collaborative teams in more than 20 years of professional development work. And I, like my colleagues, am incredibly excited for this resource because I think this really will fill the void that I have seen in a lot of teams. You know, the questions of how do we do this? What do we do? What's the most effective practice? I think a lot of those answers will be contained in this book, and happy to be with you today, Drew and Ann.
All right. Well, gosh, thank you so much for joining us today, all you wonderful authors, bringing your scintillating insights to us today about the Fearless Instruction book. You know, obviously, food is always on my mind and always on the mind of the audience for Fearless Schools. So if this section, we're going to go metaphorical here, if this section of Fearless Instruction was a food, what would it be and why? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'll give it a shot. I'll say pizza. Pizza, I ate a lot of pizza in late night college cramming sessions when I was trying to figure a lot of things out. Pizza for me is a go-to food that is both comfort and inspiration. So pizza.
Awesome. No matter how you slice it up, that's a great answer. Appreciate that. All right. Anyone else want to take a stab? What does this section of the book represent in terms of a food?
Well, I don't know about food, Drew, but I will say coffee is an important staple in my life every day. And I feel like this particular section of the book really is that foundation that gets you started. And so I think that when I think about this first section, I think about this is laying the groundwork to have a really successful experience with your teachers and with your students in the classroom. And so I think coffee always starts my day off in that way. So I'm going to say coffee.
There you go. The groundwork, the coffee groundwork. And I'm assuming you're talking about fully caffeinated, no decaf stuff going on in this book, right?
Absolutely. No decaffeinated experiences here.
All right. And any other food correlations with this particular section?
Dr. Drew, I'm going to say salad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think when you get this book, you're going to see all the good things that you need to keep you healthy and keep your school healthy. A little bit of dressing to make it taste good. And I think you're going to get all the things that you want, and it's going to keep you satisfied.
There you go. There you go. And satisfaction is the key. So pizza, coffee, salad. I mean, that sounds like a full meal to me. So, let's get right into the meat and potatoes of this then. What do you know about the origin, and can you tell us about the origin of the book itself? How did it all get started?
Drew, I'm going to take that one, and I know you love to talk about an origin story.
Yes, yes.
And then I'm going to let my colleagues jump in, but the origin or the roots of fearless instruction comes from the research of the 90-90-90 schools.
Yes.
And some of us on this podcast, not unfortunately, it wasn't me, I read about it, were a part of the organization when the 90-90 research was being done. And they lifted from these schools high impact strategies. We've got Lisa Almeida on here with us, and I know that she gets asked, how do I be a 90-90-90 school? And so what we decided to do was, let's take what we know were research-based practices that worked, and let's do an update. And then Fearless Instruction was born. This section 1 is really based on those foundational strategies that came straight from those schools. I think when we think about that, and especially for Melissa, Michelle, and Tony, knowing that Dr. Reeves' research was the heart of this, talk to us about what that meant for you as an author.
For me, as a practicing principal, I leaned very heavily into Dr. Reeves's 90-90-90 research. That is what I used during our turnaround process at my previous middle school. And so when I think about taking what I learned in applying that research in practice and using it to create this chapter as part of this section for fearless instruction, it makes me really proud, but then it also makes me really excited that we're continuing to have this conversation about what works in schools in our most challenging contexts, and that it's not complicated, that it can be done, and that these things are applicable as soon as you read them. And there's things that you can try and make it work for your context at your school site, within your classrooms, within your PLC teams. And so it's incredibly meaningful to me personally, but I'm so excited to continue to have this conversation about the research.
Yeah, I think there's a piece here adding on to what Michelle said. For me, the research that is at the heart of this was really kind of doing two things for me. The first was knowing that it can be done. The research found that in some of the most challenging schools, which are the places with the greatest opportunities for improvement, these things made a difference. So it was that, it created that sense of efficacy that it can be done as a practitioner in my classroom, as a coach, as an administrator. It can be done. And then I think it went further than a lot of research that I've seen, which just kind of says, yes, it can be done, to begin to define what needed to happen in order for these results to take place. And I think that's the piece I'm excited after, living and supporting others in implementing this research. The foundation creates that sense of, yes, it can be done, and here's what you need to do. And where fearless instruction, this resource, comes into play is, now how do I do that? And what does that look like? And I think the most exciting thing for me is that my colleagues are not taking the here's the way to do it approach, because we know every school, every context is different. So, here's the mindset, here are the things you need to keep in mind, and don't overcomplicate it. You can do this.
I think for me, coming through the ranks and in my career, the 90-90-90 schools and research became just how we did business. Each granular piece was just critical and sound and research-based and made sense. And it wasn't a far-fetching strategy to use. And in my particular chapter, talking about instructional leadership, when we talk about maintaining the high expectations, focusing on the professional growth and building that culture, it just came alive. So I think just having that embedded in me as an administrator and even a teacher coming through my career, it just kind of came out in the pages in Fearless Instruction.
So your section is titled Laying the Foundation, Fostering a Culture of Collaboration. Great title, by the way. Now listen, why is collaboration such an important part of Fearless Instruction? Why is that the foundation?
I think when we talk about collaboration, we have to think more heads together and more ideas make us have bigger vision, bigger opportunities to get it right. And when we collaborate, we learn what other people might be doing that we could emulate, and anything that we can do to help our staff and our students and our schools be successful, we have to have an open mind. So, excuse me, when we are collaborating, we are putting the best ideas forward and we're clearing a path to success.
Clearing a path to success, absolutely, by putting those minds together. Anybody else, why is collaboration such an important foundation to helping instruction be fearless?
Well, I think, Drew, when I think about collaboration, I think about that idea of collective efficacy. And I think about just the incredible effect size that collective efficacy has on creating, high-performing, high-functioning schools. And the core of that really is how we bring our educators together to collaborate. And I think that's why this particular section is so important, because we're working to set up our schools for success in collaboration, for it to be purposeful and meaningful for our students, but also for our educators who are in the trenches really working day to day to make that growth in their students.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we always talk about self-efficacy and in making one person or a student perhaps feel good about where they're going to be and how they're going to be learning. But that collective efficacy is so important in terms of fearless instruction and change in a school. Anything else about the foundation and why collaboration needs to be that foundation?
Well, I'd add on that sense of collective means that you're not doing this alone. The demands on educators these days are more than ever before in our history. And I think back to my first year in the classroom so many moons ago, and I was scared to death doing this all by myself. I was lucky enough to be part of a great team, and that took some of that fear away. I realized that I didn't have to have all of the ideas or all of the answers on my own, but working with my teams, we could solve the problems that were in front of us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And gosh, what a great message to anyone in any span of their years in education, whether you're a new teacher or a veteran teacher or someone coming into education as a second career, that teamwork and that collaboration is part of the process of not only helping ourselves, but of course helping students as well. So if collaboration is such an important piece, what gets in the way of collaboration at our schools? And then what's one thing, all right, and obviously there's a lot that's going to be in your section, but again, what gets in the way of collaboration? And then what's one thing that we can do to get around that impediment or that barrier to collaboration?
Well, if I may, I think one barrier that I've observed is the lack of support. There's almost this sense of, we've created this time and space for you to collaborate. Now go forth and prosper. And so if there's one thing that I could urge and where I believe this resource is going to be helpful for leaders as they come back into a busy school system is how can we support our teams? Particularly in my chapter, it's around how do we make meaning of the data, the formative assessments that are in front of us. We expect educators to know how to do this already, and that's just often not the case. We need coaching and support. And that's where I think a resource like this book it can help busy educators as we start a new school year.
Absolutely. Anybody else with that one?
I agree 100% with Tony on that. And I'll take it a little bit further in saying that I think what this book really creates in these first chapters are the structures and processes for successful collaboration. A lot of times, what we see as obstacles is, we have teacher groups coming together. We're in the same room. We're at the same table. Now, what do we do? What does that conversation look like? And I think when I think about my chapter, which is really settled around formative assessment and how you build that into your instructional design plan, those are the pieces that we want them bringing to the table so that they can have those robust conversations about data.
Right. Teachers coming together and staff coming together, it's got to be more than just coffee and snacks and idle chatter. It's got to be some substance to that. So yes, I love the hearing about that too, is that yes, groups with no focus, that can be a problem. So how do we give tangible strategies to those groups? And it sounds like this chapter does that. Anything else with a strategy we can use to get that collaboration going?
Sure. Drew, I would say, even backing that down further, I lead off this book in chapter 1 talking about instructional leadership. And I think that our superintendents and councils who are hiring principals need to look for leaders who value collaboration. And we have to have leaders looking at our schedules and making sure that we have the allotted time for collaboration.
Yeah.
And we're intentional about that. It's not an afterthought. Like Michelle said, we want our teachers to know what to do when they get into the moment, but we've also got to make sure that we have the moment. So I would say putting leaders in our schools that are intentional about setting the stage and environment for the collaboration to start.
Absolutely. Yeah, that time is like the ultimate resource that teachers and staff need to do that critical work. So thank you so much. And thank you for mentioning the leadership aspect of it and what school leaders need to do. So that begs the other question, right? So let's say, I'm a school leader. How can I use your chapter in particular with my staff? Like, what would you say to principals or, even school superintendents or people at the district level about your particular section and why it's so vital to making change happen?
Well, I'll jump in. As the first chapter, I talk about instructional leadership and the big ideas for leaders in a building, looking at what is your culture like and how to build a culture that is psychologically safe, celebrates growth, includes everyone. So setting the stage for culture, and then again, having great stewardship over your resources of time and funds, and making sure that the resources are in place. And then how to get those high quality teachers, making sure that we recruit them, we train them, we retain them, and then we continue to grow them to meet all the needs of the students that we have.
Absolutely.
Drew, I want to jump in on this too. With
Sure, go ahead, Dr.
In the instructional leadership chapter, I think what's really cool, Melissa's really lined out leadership moves, but alongside of that, we also have reflection exercises for teachers. So if this is what we're saying leaders should do, teachers can, reflect on, are you getting this as a teacher? So that it becomes a conversation between the leaders and the teachers in the building, because it's not something that just one person does or the other entity does. And Melissa very carefully wove that together to say, leaders, here's this, but teachers, here's what you can expect. And I think the clarity that it creates in how we move forward of fearless instruction is just a huge contribution.
Well, gosh, anything else for the good of the group about your particular section and about fostering a culture of collaboration and why that is so important? Any final thoughts?
Drew, when I'm thinking about what Ann just said, and then I'm thinking about this chapter on formative assessment, I think one of the things that it does for both our leaders and our educators, it paints a very simple picture of how to create those moments to collect usable data from our students as you move through a lesson. I think it creates examples for teachers to talk about in their PLCs, for them to collaborate around. It gives our educators some resources to really start those conversations, and then the ability to come back and continue to look at different pieces of the book as they move through the school year, I think is really important. And it's just going to be an incredible resource.
Yeah.
If I put my principal hat on, I would be incredibly excited to be able to take pieces of this entire book and use throughout the year with my PLC teams.
Right. And gosh, that's like any good, like we started with food, that's like any good meal. You want it to be something that can sustain you throughout the year. So that is awesome to hear. Wow. Anything else?
Yeah, true. As my colleagues have said, this is both fodder, food for the leadership in the building and for the teachers in the building. And you asked the question of how might a principal engage teachers with our chapters. And for me, it's both. Michelle sets the stage with, what do we mean by data? Data's not just numbers. It's meaningful evidence of what our students know and are able to do. And then once I have that meaningful evidence, my chapter is, now what do I do with that? And so principals can support teachers in using that chapter as a guide for that conversation. I think, my big idea is there isn't a single protocol that works in every given situation. What we really need is for teachers to have the right mindset when they're looking at that evidence to ask the right questions and use that evidence to find the answers to those questions, so they can work together to plan instruction. So for teachers, it's support in finding that mindset. For leaders, coaches, administrators, it's what should these conversations be sounding like? And if I'm not hearing that in the collaboration, then how do I support it in moving closer to it? Or if I am hearing that in the collaboration, how do I celebrate that success and take it to scale in the other teams in my building?
Right, exactly right. How do you celebrate and scale it up so it's not just one group or one team that's doing well, but you want it to be every team and every group doing well. So I applaud you guys for taking on such a critical topic to improve not just one school, but all schools and all schools working across the nation, across the globe. There you go. So, thanks not only for helping to write such a great section of Fearless Instruction, but also for taking time out of your busy authorial lives to talk to us on the Fearless Schools podcast. And, this is a special note. So Tony Flock, Dr. Michelle Cleveland, Melissa Stefanski, listen, they're all CLS associates too, right? So think about this one. They're all authors of this book, but they're also involved in CLS. So get the book, and then you can reach out to these folks anytime and say, hey, not only tell me a little bit more about your book, because you can reach out to them, bring them to your school and say, hey, we'd like to do some collaboration on that with the book so we can help out in that way too. So, listen, audience, you did it. Now, take a moment to check out the Fearless Instruction book, the Creative Leadership Solutions website, and let folks know just how super cool they both are. All right. And as always, I'm Dr. Drew Tomlin, host of your Fearless Schools podcast, wishing you well and saying stay fearless on the bright road ahead. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Thank you.